On December 21st was the arrival of the winter's low dark sky, and communities around the world looked to the miracle of light as a sign of rebirth and a source of hope. Each Sunday during December, this time of winter's arrival and darkening skies, we at UUUC have acknowledged the turning of seasons and the coming of new life with the return of light, and have recommitted ourselves to the protection of everyone's right to his or her own radiant humanity. Our first candle symbolized hope and expectation. Our second candle was a symbol of joy that cannot be contained. The third candle was for love, as a reminder that there is no greater power in the world than love. This morning, we light this fourth candle for peace, which speaks to all of us the anticipated outcome of hope, joy, and love as we reach out to the world community. Good morning. On this Sunday, past the winter solstice, we welcome the coming of the light as we have passed the darker days of the winter. We are so glad that you've joined us today. I'm Martha Sinkula, your service leader. Welcome to the Umpqua Unitarian Universalist Congregation. Our speaker today is Michael Wheeler, our Director of Music. He will be available for an after-sermon Zoom discussion. Every Sunday check-in begins at 11:15, with conversation beginning at 11:30. And as we continue to meet through recorded services, I know how many of us are really missing the beloved community of in-person services. It is now more important than ever to make every effort to stay connected with one another during this separation. Please call and check in with others and see how they're doing, and just say hi. If you're using YouTube, help others who might find it difficult to do so, in order that as many of us as possible can participate in the services. If you want to participate in our after-service discussion and haven't yet used Zoom, just Google the Zoom to download the free app. Just follow the easy prompts, and once you've done that and signed up for the free Zoom account, click on the link in your email that Michael Wheeler sends out each week. If you miss the after-service discussion, they are recorded just like our services, so you can view them anytime on YouTube. Services are generally uploaded on Saturday evenings. Otherwise, these discussions are recorded again, so you can view them anytime on YouTube just like those services. And since you're using YouTube to view this service, please click on the red subscribe button or bar, or link. This will make it much easier to find us each week, actually anytime. In addition to services and discussions, we also have meditations and interviews. There's a lot to check out. And if you're having trouble hearing our services on YouTube, you can click the CC button found at the bottom, right there at the bottom of the screen. Click on it and it will give you the captions that will appear so you can understand or hear what is being said. We thank Michael Wheeler and Lucy Swangham for their work on producing these videos and services every week. Thank you. As I begin our service in lighting the chalice, I invite you to consider these words by Reverend Lois Van Leer. We light our flaming chalice to illuminate the world we seek. In the search for truth, may we be just. In the search for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find peace.
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and old lang syne? For old lang syne, my Jo, for old lang syne. Surely he'll be open still, and surely I'll be mine. And we take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne.
Our opening words are by Hafsat Abiola. Peace comes from being able to contribute the best that we have and all that we are toward creating a world that supports everyone. But it is also securing the space for others to contribute the best that they have and all that they are. Now is the time in our service for reflection. Find a comfortable position, feet on the floor, body relaxed. And as we take a slow breath in and a slow breath out, let us gather our energies as we participate in this three-part meditation, listening to the words, spending time in silence, and enjoying the music. The words are by Wendell Berry. When despair grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in the fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars, waiting for their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free.
So I wanted to take a break and introduce the following piece of music. Several years ago, when I was working on my Master of Fine Arts in Music Composition thesis, one of the projects I wanted to do was to take a science fiction novel. I know it's become kind of a joke right now that I'm always talking about science fiction. To take a science fiction novel by the name of The Big Time. And this was, in the novel, you had two factions, the spiders and the snakes, who were fighting this temporal war. They would send people back into the past that would change the future and give some advantage to one faction over the other in the ensuing billions of years that this war was going on. I found two artists to team up with. One was Elaine Noel, where I just sent her the lyrics and the melody and the sheet music, and she just did an awesome job. She's a singer of R&B and even a little disco, and her music is a lot of fun if you want to check it out. The other artist, though, the person who wrote the lyrics to the rap portion, is a young man. He was a college student at the time that goes by the name of Rep. And he's a Christian rapper, but he also has a strong interest in science fiction. And as you will see, because I transcribed his lyrics for you, he's quite gifted and quite profound, and I didn't realize exactly how profound his lyrics were until I actually went to transcribe them, which was something more of an ordeal than I expected. But see what he has to say, and I think that will fit in very nicely to our discussion today. So thank you.
Yeah, wish I could understand the way the world works. I feel lost. So many times I felt like giving the white flag a toss. Quitting was never an option, never a plan. If plan A didn't work, it's cause it died with the man. We never thought we would die. If only we could change time. We could be gods with our own lives, making it seem fine. Maybe we find freedom in building a better future. Taking the future, mending the past like time sutures. We've all got things we wish that we could take a second crack at it. And if we did, then maybe we could make it have a better fit. Like if we changed the green to red, and maybe we would stop on time. But maybe green is peace and red is angry on our freaking mind. What would happen if we mastered time? Would we be better off with what's designed? Could it be that plan A never died? We just gave up in time.
We only breathe, we only dream about the emptiness. We bruise so easily because of your kisses.
Wish I could understand the way the world works. I feel lost. I've seen so many people die for what they didn't think had a cost, and that's never the thought. We live in our own bubbles, don't think outside of it, and that's what brings trouble. Now we have war when nothing matters than the tick-tock. Factions fight between the generations till they crisscross. History is in the air like never land or never end. We're just in the middle like a monkey trying to catch the wind. Now they said that pride comes before the fall. Time doesn't fall, but night does when the sun's called. Leaves do when the summer stalls, and people do when they had it all and then lost it. But what would happen if we mastered time? Would we be better off with what's designed? Could it be that plan A never died? We just gave up in time.
We only breathe, we only dream about the emptiness. We bruise so easily because of your kisses.
Wish I could understand the way the world works, or maybe not. Can you understand an infinite line when you're a dot? It's our perspective, not position, that aids in the comprehension. Banking on attention deficit only brings more contention. Look around, see the tensions, everyone seeking answers for world peace. Hunger, debt, homelessness, and cancer. Obese, Middle East, elections promise a band-aid. I'm hoping to keep a promise that a wedding band gave. Seeking we shall find, asking it shall be given. Well, I'm asking for this to make sense so I can keep on living. I got my finger on the button of my intuition. So do I take things in my own hands and deal with this fruition? But what would happen if we mastered time? Would we be better off with what's designed? Could it be that plan A never died? We just gave up in time.
Our speaker today is Michael Wheeler, our Director of Music. And as all of you may know, he holds quite a few degrees in quite a few areas, and he's quite knowledgeable and provides us with many things in philosophy, in music, history, and I could go on and on. He has gone to music colleges. He's got degrees in musicology. He's got a doctorate. He's quite intelligent and quite talented. I won't let his head get any bigger, so I won't say much more. But I want you to know that his primary focus after he became an ordained minister is examining the role of story in its shaping of the self and community. And as you may know, he's also our director, videographer, and editor of all our recorded sermons that you are seeing every week, doing excellent work. Thank you, Michael.
Well, a very happy Sunday to you, our UU family. We are on the precipice of a new rotation around the sun for this beautiful planet that we live on. It is a distinct honor to be able to talk about the new year in a sermon, primarily for me because the New Year celebration growing up was always my favorite holiday. And it really became my favorite holiday as a teenager. When I was between the ages of 13 and 18, I really spent the vast majority of my time in the community theater. And the community theater was a place where people of all ages met, and we all committed to a single goal, regardless of anything that may divide us in our lives. We had a play or a musical to do, and we knew the incredible work that would go into such an endeavor. But as tends to happen, people group themselves off, often by age, and that's certainly the way it worked in the community theater that I was part of. And so the teenagers typically spent a lot of time together. And when I say teenagers, I mean those who were still struggling to escape their teen years. They may be 20 or 21, and then actual 13 to 19-year-olds. and it was a lot of fun. Uh, One of our friends had a rather large ranch. Her grandfather was a alfalfa farmer. And so we would gather New Year's, and every year when the clock struck midnight, we would throw Christmas trees onto a giant bonfire and drink sparkling cider. Later it was champagne, because we did actually stay together long enough to legally buy alcohol as a group of friends. And assuming we had a significant other, we would kiss. If we didn't have a significant other, we would find someone to kiss, which was kind of an interesting ritual in of itself, because it was kind of an unspoken rule that that kiss was going to be an isolated incident, that it was not going to lead to any further intimacy. The young women were rather stern on that point. But it was a fun time of year, and we listened to our favorite music, and we had great discussions. And even though it has been embarrassingly 2 decades since I've gotten to experience that, the memory and the joy that I experienced in those times of really feeling a sense of belonging that started in the theater, that started with the creation of something bigger than myself, and translated into the most wonderful relationships of my life. And it is interesting, the similarities between theater and church, both in the ways that are wonderful and in the ways that are comical. And maybe we can get into that kind of a discussion during our Sunday response. So, truthfully, the title of this talk is rather improperly titled, because the fourth Advent date is for peace. Hope happened already. So if I say a prayer of hope for a new year, perhaps we're being a little redundant from previous services. But I started to think about it, and if peace is to exist, I think we have to have hope for peace before we can do the work of actually pursuing peace. I don't know how many of you had watched the interview that I did with Professor Surinder Singh from Raj Academy, but one of the big aha moments of that discussion was the idea of taking the first step. And for him, it was absolutely essential that in that conversation, I understand that whether it be music or spirituality or attaining what we might call new levels of consciousness, the first step is not to meditate. The first step is not to pray. And the first step is not to pick up an instrument. The absolute first step is to believe that it's possible. So, how about amending the title of today's talk to A Prayer of Hope for Peace in a New Year? And when we start to think about it, when we start to ponder, what exactly does peace mean? In its most fundamental, we could say that peace is an absence of conflict. Maybe you have a different definition. And again, that's something that we can discuss. But an absence of conflict. But is conflict always a negative thing? I would submit to you that conflict can be constructive or destructive. So consider 2 religions that really are our forebearers as Unitarian Universalists. And the first would be Judaism, and the second would be Christianity. Now, one of the fascinating cultural aspects of Judaism was this notion that the Holy Scriptures needed to be debated, right? And that even if a person had to, in the end of the debate, change their minds about what the Scripture meant, it doesn't mean that their initial thoughts were invalid. In fact, it was a cultural element for the Jewish people to recognize the beauty of the journey. And when we contrast that with the New Testament, the Christian church, the idea that you could have your own interpretation of the scriptures was something that was anathema to the Christian doctrine. The Christian churches went through great pains to try and establish what was the one true reading of the Bible in general, but certainly the New Testament. Think about one of our church fathers, Michael Servetus, who actually died for his rejection of the Trinity. Hence the idea Unitarian Universalist. So I would say that from a cultural standpoint, that in my opinion, right, and some very dogmatic Christians might disagree with me, but in retrospect, I believe that that we could have learned a lot from the Jewish culture, that debate, especially healthy debate, respectful debate, and constructive debate, was more likely the more peaceful avenue. And why is that? I think, at least at a fundamental level, people who constructively conflict, meaning we understand each other better because we've been able to communicate in a way that conveys what we know and what we believe, can be a very unifying experience. The problem seeps in when we start to adhere ourselves to dogma, that there is only one correct way of doing things. So I would say that in seeking to define peace, what we ought to strive for is both an absence of destructive conflict and an intention of inclusion. So we are both open and sharing with each other, and we are not trying to force individuals into our way of thinking or even our group. Now, this is something that I genuinely feel the UU Church has a leg up on. I think it's primarily built into the 7 principles. One of the reasons that the 7 principles can be so broad is that in principle, in principle, somebody could come into the church with wildly different political views or social views even, but with an air of respect to people who disagree with this person, would be welcome in the church, right? In theory, at least. Maybe in practice, we are not always as good as we can be on this notion. In the same way that that conflict can be either constructive or destructive, I think we also have to be wary about the notion of inclusion, though. And that's why I say an intention of inclusion. If you take history's examples of, say, the extreme right wing, so we're talking primarily about National Socialists like the Nazis or the fascists in Italy, there was an idea of homogeneity, right? That we all ought to be the same. But the way that that was done, that was accomplished in an extreme right-wing mindset, was that we needed to exclude people, either through outright murder or by exporting people or removing people from the nation. So we are excluding people in pursuit of homogeneity. But at the same time, if you look at the extreme left wing, so we're talking primarily about, say, communist China, the Soviet Union, there was an idea of seeking homogeneity in the culture, but it was by forced inclusion, right? So we have a set in the extreme left societies where if you do not believe as we do, say economically or socially, then you are a social outcast. You risk going to the gulags, you risk, and to some extent you risk being murdered, Now, I don't believe that we're anywhere near that risk in our own society now. I do see the trends of both ideologies creeping up. And to be honest, it concerns me. So as we enter this new year, I am praying hard for both the idea of constructive conflict and an intention of inclusion. So if I can be presumptuous enough, I'd like to give us a prescription for peace. And some of these might sound familiar to you. The first would be to honor the divine in the individual and not the group. Worded another way, we might say something along the lines of every individual has inherent worth and dignity. And what that means is that we ought not, as best we can, we ought not to judge somebody because of the perceived group they belong to, whether it be race, religion, gender, or any of the other ways that we group people. But at the same time that we recognize that the individual is not representative of the group necessarily, right? There's always exceptions. So many of you know that I fight against the idea of systemic racism, meaning I don't believe that there's very much value in ascribing our society the title of being systemically racist. I believe that individuals are racist, and to castigate an entire group with this sin does not benefit our society. Again, perhaps this is something we can discuss in more detail as AEO gets going, and I look forward to that. At the same time, though, the individual has to recognize that they have a responsibility to the community. And we can see religious examples of this in, say, the Good Shepherd, where the Good Shepherd watches one of his sheep go astray and decides that for the good of the flock, it is worth risking the flock in order to save that one sheep. And I like that story very much because having worked with what we call at-risk youth for a good portion of my adult life, I can tell you that there are plenty of lost sheep out there that nobody is going after. And it's very disheartening. And there are many of you who have worked with what we might call at-risk youth, who I'm sure can attest to this. The thing about serving the community, though, is that we must understand that for nobility to exist, the commitment to the group must be voluntary. Because if it's compulsory on any level, then that completely diminishes the notion of charitability. So if we are to be a charitable person, we must commit to the community voluntarily. Otherwise, it's a form of taxation. We could say social taxation. And while taxation might give us the revenue we need, it cannot give us the morality we need. I've often thought that there is no policy solution for something that is a moral issue. And I would end by saying, let us shun hypocrisy in all of its forms. There is the Bible verse about not seeing the speck in someone else's eye when there is the log in your own, or something to that effect. I should have brought up the Bible verse before I decided to talk about it. But I think you get the meaning. Now, the Bible prescribes that we remove the log from our own eye. But it doesn't say that we should not acknowledge the speck in someone else's eye. So what that means is that if we see something unhealthy in our society, we have the ability to exercise discernment, to decide whether or not that is healthy. What we ought not to do is to hate and to judge. Because again, if we decide to judge as opposed to discernment, then I would say that's playing God. But more than anything, I would say let us really heed the poem that was read by Martha. And that says, "When despair grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be." Now, how universal is this line? How many times have you been concerned for the future that it indeed keeps you up at night? I can tell you this is an experience that I've had. Wendell Berry says, "I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds." And what that means is that we have some comfort in nature. It was the transcendentalists, many of whom were also religious forebearers of our church, that says that God can be understood through nature, and that if we commune with nature, then by proxy we are communing with God. So the world troubles you, seek refuge in nature. "I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water." And again, this is something that's uniquely transcendentalist, because when we look at the natural world can be something rather chaotic and dangerous. But there's a great beauty in the natural world that lets us know that through the chaos, there is an order to our existence and a beauty to our existence. "And I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for the light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free." The day-blind stars, that is something, right? Because what else is that but a statement of faith? When the sky is lit, we cannot see the stars, but we know they're there. And likewise, if we are sheltered in place and isolated, we might not see each other in the way that we know. We might not feel each other's love, but it is there. It is, as always, an honor to be able to give these talks. I would say that for all of you concerned about the future and the conflict that we see now, I would direct you to the author Fritz Leiber, who wrote The Big Time, which was part of the project of the song that I played earlier. The final chapter of his book reads, "All evolution looks like war at first." It is part of my faith that things are getting better, and I hope that my faith is well-founded. Bless you. Amen. Blessed be, as Dennis says. I hope to talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
As we close our service, I would like you to consider these words by C. Joy Bell. "The day I understood everything was the day I stopped trying to figure everything out. The day I knew peace was the day I let everything go. Go now in peace, and blessed be."